So let's talk about CI/CD, future of CI/CD, where we are, where we're going. I have wonderful people with me today. Let's start with Kohsuke. I'm never sure how to pronounce your name, so I will let you introduce yourself.
Kohsuke, yeah, no, it's Kohsuke. And yeah, so I'm the co-CEO of Launchable. I created Jenkins, the CTO of Klaviyo. I work for some microsystems. I did a lot of things.
And then we have Bruno, my boss. Who are you, Bruno? What are you doing here?
I used to say that I hold the Costco card when we at the times that we had an office. These days, I just try to bring some organization to chaos. So yeah, one of the founding members here at Chipa, and yeah, looking forward to learning from you guys today.
Oh, and clearly you play guitar, so there's other in the background.
I say those are memories of when I used to have a life before startups and all that stuff. So maybe after the startup, I'll pick it up again.
Do they ever leave the wall?
It's been 2 years now. It's been 2 years.
Kohsuke, you basically defined CI/CD, right?
You're giving me too much credit, but okay, I'm going to play along. Sure.
I mean, you created Hudson. Hudson became Jenkins. Mm-hmm. Jenkins is a synonym for CI/CD in a way. So maybe you didn't define it in words, but at least from implementation perspective, you're the man, right? So what led you to believe that there are some different or modified opportunities you're pursuing? I mean, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm working on, the QA. I guess I'm working on the quality problem, and that's how I think about it. Because I created Jenkins, I had a lot of opportunity to talk to different software development teams, and they kind of all have the same mundane and sexy problems, which also happened to be the problem I had, which is when I make a one-line change in Jenkins, it's got like 18,000 test cases, and all of those tests have to go through before that change is allowed into the master branch, and that takes a freaking hour. And I know that it's a big system. I'm making just a small change. Why would I have to run every test? And it turns out that everybody's suffering like a multi-hour testing. And I saw some big companies doing really clever things to use machines to identify the right subset. So I thought, great, so it's doable. Everyone has this problem. I got to solve this. So that's kind of like a starting point.
Nice. So is it that somehow connected with shifting left? I mean, one of the things that I experienced a lot with working with different companies is, hey, we have tests that now take like anything between 1 hour and 7 days to execute. Yeah. We need to deploy something right now. So our best bet is just not to run them, right? If I understood right, what you're doing is kind of like you're saving people from not running tests because that takes too much, right?
Yeah. So what prevents people from shifting tests left, right? It's just they don't have enough money to burn to spend on database, or if you're doing embedded development, you just can't run all the tests all the time. That's period. And there's nothing fundamentally difficult about running automated tests aside from that. So, part of often one way we explain what we do is it's like packing like a thinly watered down orange juice back into the concentrated form, so that we pack more vitamin C's in the small amount of liquid, and then you can drink that. But actually, more broadly, stepping back from this narrow tactical problem, what I think is this. So first wave of CI/CD automation was driven by automations putting together by humans, right? So we have individual machines on the factory floor that automated testing or build tool or whatever, and then we lay out that factory. But that part is done by hand, by gut and instinct. So we thought, if Jenkins is producing tons of data, and then that's currently not used in any meaningful way. Maybe a developer look at those, the last 10 lines of the console log if the build actually fails, but that's it, right? So that seems like an incredible waste. And if you can use those to actually more adaptively we tweak the delivery pipeline on its own, then it becomes like a self-regulating process. So that's kind of like what I think needs to happen the next way.
So it's in a way trying to test what matters within a given context.
Yeah.
Instead of just blindly running everything always.
Yeah.
Am I getting it right?
Yeah, exactly. Like think about like a movie reel, right? If they got the 60 frame per second, right? So that's like when you're trying to deploy fast enough, that's kind of what it becomes, right? Every increment gets smaller. So it starts to make sense to more focus on delta, like what has changed, and then do the right thing depending on that delta. And then that's reality. And we already kind of do that, right? Victor, you mentioned earlier, like if somebody needs to deploy a hotfix, then like all the red tape gets removed and you just need to run a few things and then you're off allowed to go to production. So, we kind of already do that. It's like a haphazard way. Like imagine actually doing that in a data-informed manner.
Right. So I remember in the past had solutions, like for example, hey, I can post a message to my commit or a pull request and say, test only this, Yeah. And basically us deciding what we want to test depending on the context.
Right.
And if I understood right from Launchable, you're basically moving that decision what should be tested into the hands of machines in a way, right?
Yeah.
Are we talking already about ML or AI or something like that?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I mean, since when the last time the ops people trust that developer coming to them, look, like this fix is just one line chain, it's gonna be all right. It's a totally lawless chain, and like production blows up in fire, right? So I mean, the one aspect is just not, there's as a humans, like we shouldn't be trusted beyond certain limit, and then beyond that, I think the other aspect is when in places like this, wherever like an amount of data goes beyond certain threshold, it stops making sense for humans to be drinking directly from the fire hose. And then in system administration, the ops side, that happens like a decade ago, right? The number of servers they deal with simply went beyond what any humans could comprehend. So in the ops domain, you see this more statistical based on our approach to the problem. And I think that testing or quality in general is already at that point as well.
Yeah. Now when you say it, that reminds me of if I could make a parallel, right? When in infrastructure today, nobody scales, or at least nobody's trying to scale anymore manually, right? We have machines that are deciding where to go up, when to go down, when to move here, right?
Yeah.
Is it in a way almost applying those principles, not necessarily the same ones, but those ideas to testing or something like that?
It's a very similar parallel to it. And it's not just testing that this is happening, by the way. Like, one of the recent waves of startup is around like people mining the GitHub repositories to figure out what the similar pattern of code changes that the people are applying in different places. And now suddenly you have this like a machine learning assisted auto code fix suggestions, like a common bugs, how they get resolved. And I've heard from people inside Google, like they have in-house system like that, and then they have a auto suggestion for compilation errors. So that's another example where if you have enough data, we can turn that into a useful thing. And that's not even tied to the developer space alone, right? Somehow we seem to think like we're immune from this quote unquote the big data, like the phase shift. But my claim is like it's going to disrupt us quite all right.
So how does the setup look like? What's the involvement that I would need? Eventually, I want to write code, right? I guess that's everybody's goal. All the engineers in the world are writing code that can be code of application tests or code of infrastructure or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But on top of that, what do you envision as being my operational involvement in running tests in such a way?
So the short answer is you're not going to see any changes. I mean, already, right, by today's role separations, it's such that the people involved in maintaining and running this delivery pipeline, it's largely hidden from what the developer is doing. And that's kind of what the GitOps is about. So that, I think, is going to be still the same. And then so you continue as far as you, the happy developer, is concerned. You're just gonna push the change up in the branch, and then whatever automation happens, then that's kind of the same. And then really, in terms of like how we interface the build process, it's really, we made it super easy because we just need to, in some sense, like all we are doing is like working with the test runners to figure out what test to order, like run in the right order. So it's mostly like hands-free from even from the DevOps engineer's perspective.
So eventually you want to get rid of humans, if I understood right?
Well, yeah, I think the world, this world just has so much more software that needs to be written. Like we need everyone's help. So I don't think we ever get, well, at least hopefully before at least until I die, I hope we don't eliminate the need of developers completely. But I think what we are all trying to do is like amplify individual developers' capabilities so that we can pack a lot more punch, like weight behind the punch. Right? I feel like that's a mission that both of us shares.
So what should I do? How does it work? Is it a service or is it something that I install?
Yeah, so the brain part of it is as a service. Yeah, trust me, you're not gonna want to maintain these models and data and training, and like I'm having like a hard time doing it in this company itself. So, but there's a small piece of the client side tool that runs inside your build process, and it really only does like three things. So the one is like we need to know the bill of materials, meaning like what source code is used to produce the binary that you're going to be data testing. So, and then, later when you run the test, you're going to give us like, okay, so here are the 10,000 test cases I got, and tell me, I want to run like a 30-minute subset of this test. So tell me which test I should run, and then we crunch those numbers, and then get back to you, say, here's the list. And then the integration invokes your build tool in the right way. I mean, most test runners are already capable of receiving the test to run. So we just need to interface through those command line interface to kind of pass the right option, run the test, and then it run the test, whatever test runner you're using, anything from Maven to C-test to, Python nodes to RSpec to what have you. And then in the end, we just collect the test reports, right? So also thanks to in part to Jenkins, like all these test runners can produce a machine readable test results. So you just look at those to figure out what has actually happened and then kind of go from there. So it's very trivial integrations. And that's something I didn't want it. Because
does it take time?
So people have scary delivery pipeline. And I guess I don't need to tell you that, but it's like a tower of Jenga in many places. So I'm really trying to minimize the amount of modifications they need to make in those. So just 3 touches. Yeah, very easy. Yeah.
Is it kind of working from the very start, or does it require time until the models learn enough about tests?
Yeah, great point. So yeah, we do. I mean, there needs to be enough data amassed. I mean, as more data comes in, the performance of the model gets better, and that's one of the key challenges of the machine learning. So if you're really only running this one test, like in the test every week, for example, then it's gonna be a long time before you get anything meaningful out. But on the other hand, like if you're talking about something like unit tests, like those are running like tens of times a day, so it's pretty quickly it's gonna ramp up. And maybe another thing to mention is if you think about it, what we are doing today is like a worst possible thing. Like we let the test runner scan the directories, and then whatever order it finds is going to be the order that it's going to run the test. So basically, it's no different from random, which is probably the worst possible thing you can do. So what you're going to see, like any little improvement, but day by day, you're going to see a little bit of improvement. It's almost like watching a plant germinate and grow. And so I think you're gonna love it.
Is the correlations that you're making on models are they limited to each, let's say, company that uses, or you're trying to leverage and create some higher level experience or models or something like that?
So right now, like we build every model for every customer separately. And then, so in other words, like it tries to learn how this particular project and how these particular set of developers behave. But down the road, I mean, one would naturally think, like, if you look at all the Maven projects, they have a common directory layout, which kind of implies some distance between certain tests and source code. And we think we're all humans after all, so some of the behavior should be comparable and similar. So, I think at some point we get to there, but not quite at this moment.
Because kind of my experience is that almost every company thinks that they're special, doing something very special, and yet we're all repeating the same patterns, just coming from different, start from different directions, but end at the same destination. Not necessarily exactly the same, but very similar, right?
Yeah, it's a very, how we do things is just way too diverse. And I think it's hurting us. I mean, one of the reasons like the Jenkins really took off is because it's flexible enough that everyone can hack it to do what they want to do. But I mean, compare what we're doing with like a tax accountant, right? Like anywhere in the US, like they can get the one certification and that's the exact same thing. Ignoring the state, by the way, but so if we have that level of uniformity, then like we have a tremendous leverage in one let's say infrastructure layer getting improved. It's going to lift the tide for everybody's boat. So I kind of hope we have a little more uniformity. Maybe not all the way, but a little more uniformity would be nice.
What do you say, Bruno? You're awfully quiet today.
No, I'm learning, and that's amazing and super interesting, because that's one of the things we face today, right? And it's exactly the scenario we go through. There is a new release, there is a new launch. Even though it's a small thing that you're running, we basically have to test everything, spend hours just to get something up and running. So it's a spot on. It's and what I'm curious to see moving forward as well, it's exactly building that pattern across many companies, because today I was on a call with someone and he was asking us about the service and the software, and my answer to him was, we're unique just like everyone else, right? Everyone else thinks they're unique, but at the end of the day, I would say 80 to 85% of what companies do, right, especially across software, we're all the same, and we have the 10 to 15% difference there. But it will be interesting to see how much we can learn from that machine over time, comparing, especially if we can compare us to other peers and get some intelligence and data from there. That would be super interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd imagine like part of what Shippa is trying to do is also by bringing some, pre-baked ways of doing things, you can be more productive, right? So I feel like we're in some sense on the similar mission.
That's right, and that's what Victor and I were talking today is, hey, you can go as complex as you want, but what are the real scenarios that you're trying to cover, right? And if you look at it again, 80 to 85% of the applications that you're getting out there, or the tests that you're running, or the stuff that your team is developing, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it may have some differences between company to company, but it's the same. And that's part of what we're doing here at Shippa as well. You try to help people establish that common pattern and bring some governance around it, and then you work with them on the other 15% that it's really unique to them in that case.
Right. Yeah.
So you're building effectively a pass, right? What makes you think that we need yet another pass?
Yeah, that's kind of how I look.
So that's a good question, because I don't think we need another pass, and that's where most people, I think, suffer, and people have been hurt by the term pass before, and I think the way people has positioned pass in the past is, and is still today, some solutions is, it's very opinionated, right? This is the cluster you have to run this thing on. You cannot, like we were talking about it yesterday, you cannot break the glass and go behind and make the changes you need in case you need. You cannot use the pieces under the covers or at the infrastructure level, saying, well, today I want to use this provider or that provider, and tomorrow I want to move things. So I think PaaS presents a very rigid way of going, and especially with microservices and way people are deploying and scaling applications, it doesn't fit the bill. And I think that's where most solutions, they are coming and they are failing. And we're working with financial services and other folks that looked at PaaS and they tried PaaS and they just didn't like it because, requirements are changing fast with microservices. So I like to think about Shippa more as an application framework rather than a PaaS, because we allow the DevOps team to choose whatever they want, whatever cluster they want, the version, the cloud provider, the ingress controller. So you are in control of your own infrastructure. You choose the components based on what you actually need, but you're giving your developers an easier way to get their applications deployed and get these applications deployed under control. So that's where we focus. We come in on top of the infrastructure you choose, and we help you have that quick win with your developers while maintaining control and governance of things. Not sure if that kind of helps a little bit.
I guess as a context, both Victor and I worked in your previous life for the company in infancy. So PaaS, I had a hands-on experience on the challenges on trying to convince people about PaaS, even though I still kind of believe in the idea. And as I mentioned, I feel like we developers, in fact, we know better. We can roll our own, which is really not productive. But you don't see yourself as PaaS, so that was interesting.
I think PaaS may serve a lot of use cases, but I think as you start scaling and bringing more complicated applications, more complicated services, and you're an organization that you have multiple teams that prefer to use different cloud, different providers, different ingress, different whatever choice of components you want, then I think a PaaS, what we've seen talking to many users, is a PaaS doesn't allow them to scale and doesn't allow them to extend the software to what it needs to be in the future. So I think that's the challenge, but it does serve a purpose for sure.
So did you come up with this? How did you come up with this? Was this your personal suffering in the previous life, or are you walking in the stairs, a hallway in the cubicle one day, and then the lightning struck? Is that kind of how it works?
No, yeah, that I had a chance to do a startup before, and it was focused on the kind of cloud infrastructure space, and it was interesting to see things moving. And one way I positioned it, I had an opportunity to see Kubernetes coming, and people started adopting Kubernetes. And in my perspective, Kubernetes is a big step forward in terms of managing and deploying microservices. But I would say it's a two-step back, because it takes a developer back in terms of having to learn infrastructure-related components. How do I deploy this thing? What is the best infrastructure component? And we had made progress already in a way that today, when you deploy an application, you don't think if Amazon is using Hyper-V, KVMs, and you're deploying your app. So I saw my engineers and I saw other folks in this space struggling with their developer experience and the capability of delivering applications fast, microservices. So I decided to give it a try and put Shippa together.
I see. So I guess you see this as raising the level of abstractions, and then that's why you call it the framework, not so much the PaaS, because you can you can build that abstraction that you're raising. That's
Exactly.
I see. So I guess I'm mentally picturing a difference between Maven and Gradle. I don't know if your audience understands. I'm getting too old. But is that kind of, am I in the right ballpark here, or am I missing the point?
First of all, there is no discussion on Maven. Gradle is Gradle.
I'm not passing about it judgment. But, yeah. I have friends on both sides. I know.
I'm kidding. I know.
So how do you see that space, Victor? Now that you've been dedicating some time to it.
Which space?
The application around the deployment and the experience on microservices and Kubernetes and.
I think that we are in a wonderful and very complicated situation right now. When I go and look at CNCF landscape, right? My first reaction is, this is so amazing. The level, the amount of innovation happening right now is unprecedented in a way, right?
I agree.
And then the next reaction is, okay, this will be another night that I will not sleep because I will not be able to put that picture out of my mind, because no human can follow along, right? So I am highly in favor of having innovation on one hand, but on the other hand, having some kind of standardization. Hey, okay, I can explore 5,000 different things, but let me do my job first, right? And I always had kind of trouble with in-house built frameworks, platforms, whatever you want to call it, because I eventually feel that those are the things that take us away from doing our jobs in a way, because my company has business, and I should spend as much time as possible on solving the problems of that business, and as little as possible on everything else. It's similar, like in the past, I had conversations with people who would tell me, you know what, if you give me a week, I can do the same thing what Jenkins does. I can just shuffle around a couple of shell scripts and this and that, and off I go, right? And then you speak with that guy or a girl half a year later and come, so how is it going?
Almost
and
there.
They start crying, right?
And no, I agree completely on that, and I would say that today, when we start engaging with users, I think the majority of them, they're coming from that internal platform that they tried building, and then a year to 2 years later, they abandon it because they realize there's no value in trying to build this thing, and I think it starts because of that sense of uniqueness, right? There's nothing in the market that I can find because I'm so unique. But then a year down the road, you find out that, again, 80 to 85% of the stuff you do, well, it's common pattern across the industry. And the goal is to get your requirements addressed, but building a platform can be quite expensive because it requires you to bring a team, and we're seeing teams of 20, 30, 40 people just dedicated to doing this. And it becomes hard for them to maintain, build, and extend the platform as the business goals. And like Victor said, if you're in a financial industry or entertainment and so on, that this is not really the core of your business, it starts hurting you over time. And one of the things that I agree with what Kohsuke said is the goal is not to take people out of the picture, but to allow people to focus on what brings value, right? I think it's just shifting the power and where you actually spend your time. At least that's the way I see it.
So I can I personally know these many people who got this, built things on their own and now looking around and, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like which umbrella I should join. And in this space, for reason like Victor mentioned, there seems to be like a lot of people trying to come up with the opinionated or like the way to have a similar promise. And in Jenkins, we got a project named Jenkins X. In my mind, it's like in a very similar, starting from a very similar sense of the program. So I guess what's the unique? What makes the Shipper different? What's the unique angle on that? I'm curious.
That's an awesome question, and now I'll get into the boat with everyone else, and I'll say we're unique as well, just like everyone. But what I'll say is I think I stand behind the idea that microservices got us a step forward but 2 step back, and Shippa's trying to get you to think about application again. While taking advantage of the microservice and scalability and that type of architecture. But I think what's unique in that sense is focus on getting the application not only deployed, but one of the things we hear a lot is deploying applications now with microservices and the myriad of objects that are related to them and components and so on. It becomes like deploying on a black box that once it's deployed, managing this thing at scale becomes really hard. And we hear many companies saying, we just don't know who owns the service. We don't know what services are related to what services. We don't know which objects are related to my services. So when there's downtime, it's really hard for me to understand what's happening. So I think putting that application framework that covers not only the that is capable of plugging into your CI/CD and help you deploy that app, but also giving you that continuous resilience or continuous operation of the app post deployment, so you can close the loop. I think that will be key as organizations they start scaling that architecture.
That's a similar pattern that applies basically to almost any step in a life cycle of an application, right? It's similar like with testing. Developers might have slightly easier time when they are trying to figure out maybe unit tests or part of functional tests, and then as we are progressing throughout the life cycle, right? And we are going closer to the system level of thinking, then we are running in, traditionally at least, into more and more trouble, right?
Yeah, I guess so Jenkins in some sense is very similar to, in some spirit, what you're describing. Like, it's at least I don't know. I mean, some part of Jenkins allows you to raise the level of abstraction so that the people in the central DevOps team can almost create this like a vocabulary and mental model that's uniquely domain specific, and behind the scene like expands into almost like a macro expansion-ish to all sorts of common building blocks. And then that's sort of like what I'm getting a mental picture similar to Shippa. And the reason I mentioned Gradle is it's also kind of got the similar thing going. Like if you're the build guy, Gradle can be turned into almost like a domain-specific build tool. Android being one great example, but I've seen some companies who do that. And so in a few companies, and then I was blown away by those people who built their own Jenkins to the extent that I didn't even recognize it as a Jenkins. Right? At the same time, like that took a tremendous effort on their part, and also it's same as Gradle. Like the building is like a really purpose-built company internal build system. It's like a multi-year effort. So a lot of people, that limit the audience for which this made sense. And I feel like now, I don't know where I'm trying to go here, but do you see something similar, or like maybe you see it very differently?
From my perspective, I see it completely similar. And you start getting to that argument that, hey, but I can build this internally, right? I can do this myself. And the answer in the position that I always try to give is, I think, like, hey, I believe anyone is capable of building anything. But to build everything, like you said, it requires a lot of effort. And what's the value that really adds to you doing that, right? Because this is going to take the attention away from what you actually should be doing, instead of putting a 30 people team just to build something that you can find out there. These 30 people could actually be repurposed on delivering applications or on scaling your business. So I do see that. And I think that's especially because microservices and Kubernetes, I would say that Kubernetes is not so new, but from an enterprise perspective, the adoption is fairly new. So we're seeing a lot of that happening now, that people try to build something because, again, they want to take their developers away from the infrastructure layer level and get back to the application. But I think companies like Shippa and others, we need to position ourselves and do a good job in terms of telling them that there is an easier way to go on coming back to that level.
So another challenge, at least I guess we had, I'd imagine, is people, if people are starting new and they already have a foresight to think about themselves like a year or two down the road, then they can go a much easier route of, let's jump on like in a Shippa bandwagon or something else bandwagon, and then off we go. But I'd imagine like most people, I think in the sky, like you're talking to people who are a year or two into this journey. They've already built their own thing. Now they need to move, and that process, I'd imagine, would be painful for them, like a longer. And then you end up like this getting tempted to like support all sorts of people's crazy stuff. Like, is that a challenge? Like, how do you say no?
So I think that's a super interesting scenario, because if you and it's funny because if you try selling Shipa, the value proposition of telling, hey, your developers, they won't have to fiddle around with Helm charts and customize and learning deployment sets and all the stuff. Your developers can think about app, and your DevOps, instead of trying to kind of put a bunch of Terraform and Helm charts and shell script and all that stuff to have your applications deployed under control, they can focus on just governance, right? If you talk to people who are new, it's interesting because they are usually the ones that they're like, no, we're going to do it ourselves. We can do it. It's easy, because they haven't gone through that large scale pain. Right. But when we talk, I would say that our largest users today are the ones, and the easiest convincing ones, they are the ones that spent 6 months, a year, or a year and a half building something. They built a huge team. They spent millions of dollars in a year trying to sustain this thing, and they realize that it's not as easy, and they shouldn't be spending time on that. So funny enough, the easier sell for us from a Shipa perspective is to go to those folks that there are 500 services deployed, but now everything is under control. Everything is under is a mess. Developers are not happy. DevOps cannot enforce security. So those are the easiest ones to talk to be honest.
Yeah. No, I can imagine they are the one that's feeling the pain. But I guess, look, I was just talking to people who are going through the subversion to Git conversion, like right now, right? Because, it's, they wanted to do it for a long time, but it's just so like a version control system. It's so freaking embedded in like everything they do, from build to test to deployment, that they couldn't do it. Like yesterday, we were adding the Launchable support for Java's Ant build system. And that's been around for like, I think, what, two decades now? So sometimes I feel like, even if people know it, I'm pretty sure they are all for moving on to something different. But it's like I mentioned, it's like a tower of Jenga. What they have, like, believe it or not, it works. Like, moving on to the whole new thing, recreating everything, it's a major pain. Where. So that's what I was curious on. Like, or maybe it's like you figure out something, or like maybe people are not too far into that. Or
no, I agree. I think and it would be great to get your thoughts on that as well. Is we try to build Shipa again, and that goes I think against the principles of the past, right? We try to build Shipa in a way that it plugs into your existing stack, in a way that it plugs into your existing CI pipeline, it plugs into your existing clusters, your apps, your existing apps, what we're working on. So you can start realizing value quickly, and then slowly you can start migrating more and more to Shipa native, I would say, supported apps, so you can realize more value from that. But we try to build Shipa as much as possible in an integrated way that it fits into your existing architecture. But that is definitely a concern. And do you see that as well on the pipeline side of things now?
Yeah, well, so I guess in case of Jenkins, maybe you're on the lucky side now, right? Because now we are the victors, and that's the Jenga tower that the people can't afford to move out of. So, not saying I think the Jenkins is doing great in that regard, but in general, I just feel like that's part of what hinders our progress as a whole industry is because, like, I guess what works, it's a surprisingly expensive, like human resource wise, to move from something that works into something that you want. And then like I wish you could I don't have an answer here, but I wish we can make that a little less painful. Then I feel like we can move the world a lot quicker to the future.
And that's a discussion we often have with users, saying you don't need to move everything at the end of the day, right? Banks are still using mainframes. So I mean, there are great applications that you can move and get quick value, but maybe you shouldn't move everything. And I think that's an exercise that if most teams they do it, instead of just jumping on the bandwagon just because it's cool and it's a new technology that you got to learn to put on your resume, that would help make smarter decisions as well, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons in Launchable, like I'm focusing on this unsexy part is this. This is one of the few ways in which I felt like I don't need to kind of change anything people are doing, like just almost like a surgically insert the probe here and then here, and then like it can get every data we need. And so we'll see, but yeah, it's
and I think that's how you get the best value out of it, and also from a customer perspective, that's how they get the best value out of injecting something and getting the benefits out of it. The not being painful way of moving everything.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we stop here? I feel that we could continue for hours, but that we might not have hours.
Yeah, but the audience might not have that much patience. So like if they want to hear more of us like yapping, like please let us know, and then we have a second round. Let's do it that way.
That's right.
Oh, round 2. Okay, so there is no. Yeah, I was about to say no winner, but this wasn't a fight, so I'm not sure about round 2. another chat.
Yeah, this was fun. So thank you.
We could do a chat of showing my pipeline running with Launchable in the middle and getting Shipa to deploy the app after that. That would be awesome. That would be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I'm not sure actually, because Bruno, I've seen your pipeline. They're embarrassing.
At least you have some tests, right? At least you have some tests.
No, I say that test is for the weak. I trust my code.
Yeah. Well, in that case, maybe something like Launchable will incentivize writing more tests because it helps you get more value out of it. That's something I saw happen over and over. It's not just Launchable, but with Jenkins and automated tests in general. It's like people get more bang. Yeah.
You should talk. We should bring Vivek on the next call. I'm sure he will be all over writing more tests. I'm sure he has a strong opinion around that.
That'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, guys, thank you very much.
All right.
Let's do this again.
Much.